Hi everyone, my name is Courtney. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be doing a book review for the Elements of Cadence series, which includes A River Enchanted and my last read, A Fire Endless. This is an adult fantasy duology, and it is a newer fantasy series that's come out in the last 5 years, and it's one that has really impressed me, which I've been very hit or miss with a lot of recent fantasy releases, so I thought it was the perfect time to discuss this series and hopefully recommend it to other readers. This is a series by Rebecca Ross, who is very well known and loved for her YA duology that recently came out, which is called Divine Rivals. Very popular, but I've been reading her adult series and I've been loving it, so I wanted to introduce some other people to it if it hasn't been on your radar. So the Elements of Cadence is, like I said, an adult fantasy series, and it also has a very strong romance subplot if that's something you're looking for. It's not quite a romantasy where the romance overtakes the fantasy elements, but it is definitely a very strong part of the novel. I would put this into the camp of a video I did a while back on my channel, which was recommending books like Howl's Moving Castle, both the movie and the book. The reason why I feel like I was drawn to Howl Moving Castle books, and I think a lot of other people are drawn to Howl's Moving Castle adjacent books, is because we want to see a very strong coming of age story. We want to see the main character coming into her own power with the support of a romance story behind that, but not being the entire focus. And I feel like this series slots in very well with that. I would recommend this to fans of Naomi Novik, particularly like Uprooted and Spinning Silver. And I would also recommend it to fans of Catherine Arden, The Bear and the Nightingale. It has similar themes, similar feelings, similar style. So before we get into those elements and styles, let's kind of cover what this book is about. So we start off A River Enchanted with one of our main characters. He is an outsider in a lot of ways. He is a bastard-born child, and he never has felt like he fit in with the Tamerlanes, who is the clan of the eastern part of the island where he lives. He lives on this magical island where on one side of the island they are able to use magic, but they don't have a lot of crops, or they have trouble cultivating crops. And then on the eastern side where Jack lives, they have an abundance of crops and livestock, but magic does not come easily to its residents. But Jack has always felt like an outsider on his side of the island where he's grown up. And so as a young child, when he learns that he has an affinity for music and is asked to become the town bard, he decides when he gets to the mainland to learn how to be a bard that he's just not going to come back. But of course, something brings him back at the beginning of this novel. Mostly a young woman named Adara, who is the heiress of the clan, is calling him back to the island because these young girls of the clan are going missing, and Jack needs to come back and figure out why. And there's kind of three main plots happening and overlapping each other in this series. We obviously have the main plot of the young girls going missing in this first book. Like I said, there's two sides of the island, and they are clans that are clashing with each other. They don't agree with each other, mostly because the Breckons of the West are raiders, and they raid the Tamerlanes because they have an abundance of food, whereas they do not. There's, of course, this whole mystery and story behind how these clans became divided, how the island became divided, and there's also this story of the magic of the island itself. It is an island full of spirits and whimsy. These spirits play tricks on the islanders and work in mysterious and surprising ways, and of course that plays into the lore of the island itself and the bigger mystery at play that Jack and his friends have to figure out through the course of these two books. So plot-wise, world-building-wise, I feel like these books just work so well. The magic is whimsical, but there's enough fleshed out that it feels really vivid and just really wonderful to explore. All of the story beats weave and work so well together with this world building, and the plot following these different world building beats just work so well. The plot is just really compelling, and I feel like the series was really successful, giving us a lot of stakes, giving the characters a lot to struggle through, but also having the ending be very satisfying and make a lot of sense. Getting into the characters, like I said, we enter with Jack, our reluctant bard, but there are 4 different perspectives, or 4 main perspectives. We kind of flit into a couple other characters, but I would say our 4 main characters are the main perspectives. So we have Jack and Odara, the bard and the clan heiress, and they kind of had a childhood rivalry, and so they're coming back into a relationship with each other. And then then we have Sidra and Thorin. Thorin is the captain of the guard and Odera's cousin, and Sidra is one of the town herbalists. And so all of them have their own little journeys that they're working through both of the novels, as well as their romances that they're cultivating in these novels. Thorin and Sidra are already married at the beginning of this novel, but their relationship is a little bit tense. And so these novels follow those relationships while also following these characters' individual stories. And it was just really done successfully, where there was enough swooning and angst, but again, it didn't overtake the story. It didn't overtake these characters and their own personal journeys. I really fell in love with these characters. I really enjoyed them. The plots just worked seamlessly with these characters, where it felt like they were really changing the story. They were the ones compelling the plot forward. Even when the story had this like fate-like aspect to it, where things were always going to kind of come to pass, it still felt like the characters were moving and progressing the plot. So yes, there's this sense of fairy tale, there's the sense of whimsy and fate, but the characters can hold their own, and they do, and they're not being overtaken by the world building or the plot. So I gave this first book a 3.75 stars. My main gripe with it was that there are a couple moments where the author decides to go into omniscient or something very close to third-person omniscient. I don't think it was successful as third-person omniscient, especially because it only really does that in like 2 or 3 places. It just felt more like a craft issue than actual purposefulness. But the second book did not have any of those issues, and so I might have loved it even more. It just built on all of the elements of the first book, and it was just so well done, and it felt really satisfying. Overall, Rebecca Ross's writing is just really beautiful and wonderful and lyrical without being too purple. So she really invokes the fairy tale-esque air that you kind of want for this story without going over the top. And so this second novel, where we didn't have that omniscient perspective, this ended up being really successful, where the writing really enhanced the story and didn't drag away from anything. But I didn't give this book a 5-star, mainly because we get a lot more of the history and lore in this book. It is explained more in a narrative way than really going in depth with it and getting to see it super fleshed out. Everything is covered enough to understand it, but because the world building and the magic are really embedded in this history, I would have liked a little bit more of it to come into play. There are some journals that are being read. I felt like that could have been even more in the text. This already is almost a 500-page book, but hey, I'm a sucker for world building sometimes, especially when it's really important to the story, and I felt like I could have just had a little bit more. I also, while I enjoyed the ending and thought it made sense, I could have seen the ending going in a little bit of a different direction. I could have seen it taking a more tragic, bittersweet air, but it didn't. I think it still worked. It was still satisfying, but at the end of this novel, I was kind of imagining other endings that could have happened and kind of intrigued by them. But overall, again, both of these books were so strong. The second book might even be better than the first. And so for those of you that are looking for fairy tales, that are looking for strong romance subplots, this series will be perfect for you. Of course, I would look into any trigger or content warnings. Obviously, the first book deals with kidnapping, and this is a fantasy series, so there's like the threat of violence, fantasy violence, especially in the second book. Fire is also a trigger in here, as well as like the allusion to sexual violence. It never comes to pass, it never gets close, but there is like a slight allusion to that could happen, as well as pregnancy and a magical illness. But there might have been some that I missed, but those were the ones that I caught in my readings. So definitely check out if you are sensitive to those topics. But as a fantasy book, both of these were so strong, so impeccably done. It balanced all the elements that you would want in a story, plot, characters, world building, while also just being really compelling and fun to read. And I myself am definitely looking forward to reading more by Rebecca Ross. I really enjoyed this. So if you've been interested in reading this series, I hope that I could tip you into reading it if it sounds like something that's up your alley. If this does not sound like something that's to your taste, totally understand. But for my girlies who grew up with House Moving Castle and are always looking for the next fairy tale-esque read with some romance, here you go, I found it for you. It's definitely been one of the standout fantasy books that I've read over the past years, as well as just one of the stronger fantasy series I've read over the last 5 years. It felt like it had the time, it had the editing, it had the research, it felt really grounded in a real place, even though this is a magical setting. And again, the craft was there as well to support everything. It had good writing, and it also just had good technical craft. So it is something I would wholeheartedly recommend for fantasy readers. Again, let me know if you've read this, what your thoughts were, if you're planning on reading it now. I would love to know, but thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.